"Those boots for your barren wife. That's the deal." The merchant sneered as the desperate husband sold the black woman for a pair of leather boots, unaware that the giant cowboy watched from the shadows. The crowd gathered like vultures, their cruel laughter echoing across the dusty trading post. "Useless woman anyway," they whispered, sealing her fate to a life of servitude and shame. But the towering figure stepping forward had built his fortune on seeing value where others saw nothing. The giant cowboy's silver coins glinted in the desert sun as he made his counteroffer. What the sneering crowd didn't know was that this woman held the key to legal knowledge that could reshape the entire territory. And powerful men would kill to keep that secret buried. Would she find the courage to reveal her hidden talents, or would fear keep her silent forever? The desert sun blazed mercilessly over the trading post as Sela's Reston's worn boots finally surrendered to months of hard labor. The leather cracked and peeled away from the sole with each desperate step toward the merchant's wagon. Sweat dripped from his weathered face as he approached Buck Morrison, a traveling trader known for his sharp deals and sharper tongue. "I need those boots," Sela said, pointing to the fine leather pair hanging from Morrison's wagon. "My feet are bleeding through these rags." Morrison examined the destroyed footwear with disgust. "Those are quality leather. Cost me plenty in Santa Fe." His eyes narrowed with calculated interest. "What you got to trade?" Silas's calloused hands trembled as he reached into his empty pockets. Nothing but dust and broken dreams. His gaze drifted across the dusty square to where his wife Celeste stood in the shade of a weathered building. She watched the exchange with calm resignation, as if she had witnessed this desperation before. "Well now," Morrison's voice carried across the square, drawing attention from lounging cowboys and gossiping women. "Seems you got something of value after all." The cruel suggestion hung in the desert air like a vulture circling carrion. Townspeople began gathering, sensing the entertainment value of another man's desperation. Eleanor Griffith, the banker's daughter, whispered excitedly to her companions from beneath her lace parasol. Celeste straightened her spine as all eyes turned toward her. She had endured worse humiliations during the dark years before the war. This public scrutiny felt familiar, like slipping into an old dress that no longer fit properly. Her fingers unconsciously smoothed the worn fabric of her simple brown dress. "She's barren as a salt flat," Silas announced to the growing crowd. "Can't give me children, can't earn her keep. Maybe she'd serve you better." The words cut through Celeste like desert wind through canyon walls, yet her expression remained unchanged. She had learned long ago that showing pain only invited more cruelty. Behind her composed exterior, memories stirred of late nights spent learning to read by candlelight, of a plantation owner's daughter who had risked everything to teach a young slave the power of knowledge. Morrison circled Celeste like a buyer examining livestock. The crowd murmured their approval of the spectacle. "Strong enough for work," he mused aloud. "Might fetch a decent price down in Tucson." Eleanor Griffith giggled behind her gloved hand. "Some people deserve whatever fate brings them." From the shadows of the saloon porch, a massive figure observed the degrading scene. Jonas Forrester stood nearly 7 feet tall, his broad shoulders casting long shadows across the weathered planks. His dark eyes took in every detail with the calculating precision of a man who had survived by reading people's true nature. Jonas had watched Celeste during her months in town. While others saw a quiet woman of few words, he noticed how her eyes lingered on newspaper headlines, how she unconsciously traced letters in the dust with her foot, how she observed the town's social dynamics with the sharp awareness of someone accustomed to staying 2 steps ahead of danger. The trading continued with the efficiency of a business transaction. Morrison handed over the boots while Silas eagerly pulled them onto his bleeding feet. The crowd began to disperse, their entertainment concluded. "Wait!" Jonas's deep voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. The giant cowboy stepped into the sunlight, his silver spurs chiming with each measured step. Morrison looked up at the imposing figure with sudden wariness. Everyone in 3 territories knew Jonah's, Forrester's reputation as a mediator who settled disputes with wisdom rather than bullets. His word carried weight that could make or break men's fortunes. "What's your price for the woman?" Jonas asked, producing a leather pouch that clinked with the promising sound of silver coins. The crowd murmured with surprise. Why would the respected mediator want Silas's cast-off wife? Morrison's greedy eyes fixed on the silver, calculating quickly. $50, Morrison said, testing the waters. Jonas counted out the coins without hesitation. The transaction concluded swiftly, leaving Celeste standing between her past humiliation and an uncertain future. She studied her unexpected purchaser with careful attention, noting the intelligence behind his weathered features and the way other men stepped aside to give him space. As they walked away from the trading post, Celeste wondered what new form her survival would take. She had hidden her education and abilities for years, playing the role of a simple woman to avoid the dangerous attention that knowledge could bring. Yet something in Jonas's manner suggested he saw through carefully constructed facades. Behind them, the territorial governor's messenger rode hard toward town, carrying news of a crisis that would require the kind of mediation skills Jonas was famous for. The railroad dispute with the Apache Nation was escalating beyond anyone's ability to control, and time was running short. If you are enjoying this story of how one woman's humiliation will change an entire territory forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in the Arizona territory will completely change everything you thought you knew about justice and hidden strength. The desert stretched endlessly before them as Jonas and Celeste rode toward his ranch. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken questions. Celeste gripped the saddle horn of the gentle mare Jonas had provided, her mind racing through possibilities of what her new life might hold. "You're wondering why I bought your freedom," Jonas said without turning around. Celeste studied the giant cowboy's broad back. "Men don't spend silver without expecting something in return." Jonas guided his horse up a rocky incline before responding. "I'm the territorial mediator for 3 counties. Folks bring me their disputes when the law can't help them." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Problem is, I got a weakness that could cost me everything." The admission hung between them like morning mist. Celeste had learned to recognize when powerful men revealed vulnerability. It usually preceded a demand for something she wasn't willing to give. "What weakness could the great Jonas Forrester possibly have?" she asked. Before he could answer, the sound of frantic shouting reached them from ahead. A homestead came into view, with several horses tied hastily outside a modest wooden house. A man paced desperately in the yard while women's voices carried through the open windows. "Doc Peterson's here," Jonas observed, recognizing the physician's black bag on the porch. "Something's wrong." They dismounted quickly. The pacing man rushed toward Jonas with the relief of someone who had spotted salvation on the horizon. "Thank God you're here," the homesteader gasped. "It's my wife Sarah. She's been in labor for 18 hours. Doc says there's nothing more he can do." Jonas looked toward the house where anguished cries pierced the afternoon air. His jaw tightened with the frustration of a man facing a problem his reputation couldn't solve. Celeste found herself moving toward the sounds of distress before conscious thought could stop her. Through the window, she saw a young woman writhing on a blood-stained bed, while an elderly doctor packed his instruments with defeated resignation. "The baby's positioned wrong," Doc Peterson announced to the gathered women. "Can't turn it without killing them both. Best make peace with the Lord's will." The homesteader's face crumpled. "She's all I got. Can't lose her now." Celeste's hands trembled as memories flooded back. She was 8 years old again, hiding behind cotton sacks in a plantation cabin while her grandmother Mama Ruth worked miracles with her weathered hands. The old woman's voice echoed across the years. "Baby comes into this world sideways, you got to help it find the right path. Gentle hands, steady heart, trust the ancient knowledge." "There might be another way," Celeste heard herself saying. Every face in the yard turned toward her. Doc Peterson emerged from the house, his white beard stained with sweat and frustration. "What did you say?" he demanded. Celeste felt the familiar fear rise in her throat. Revealing knowledge meant exposing herself to questions she couldn't answer safely. Yet Sarah's cries continued from inside the house, growing weaker with each passing moment. Jonas stepped beside her, his presence steady as mountain stone. "She knows things," he said simply. "I learned from my grandmother," Celeste said, her voice gaining strength. "She delivered hundreds of babies during the plantation years. Some situations require techniques that medical schools don't teach." Doc Peterson scoffed. "Folk remedies won't help when modern medicine has failed." Another scream from inside the house cut through his dismissal. Celeste pushed past the doctor and entered the stifling room. Sarah lay pale and exhausted, her strength nearly depleted from hours of unsuccessful labor. The attending women looked at Celeste with mixture of hope and skepticism. Celeste knelt beside the bed and placed her hands on Sarah's swollen belly. She closed her eyes, feeling for the baby's position exactly as Mama Ruth had taught her. The child was indeed turned wrong, but not impossibly so. "I need clean cloths, warm water, and everyone except one person to leave," she instructed with quiet authority. "You can't seriously be considering this," Doc Peterson protested from the doorway. Jonas filled the doorframe behind the doctor. "Let her try." The next hour tested every technique Mama Ruth had passed down through generations of enslaved women who had learned to preserve life under impossible circumstances. Celeste used gentle pressure and careful positioning to coax the baby into the proper alignment. She spoke softly to Sarah, sharing the strength that had carried her through her own darkest moments. The room fell silent except for Sarah's labored breathing. Then, like sunrise after the longest night, a baby's cry filled the air. Celeste cleaned the infant and placed the healthy boy in his mother's arms. Sarah looked up at her savior with tears of gratitude streaming down her exhausted face. "How did you know?" Doc Peterson asked, his professional pride warring with genuine amazement. "Some knowledge travels paths that medical schools never explore," Celeste replied. Outside, the homesteader wept with joy while Jonas observed everything with calculating eyes. Word of the miracle would spread quickly through the territory. The woman who had been traded for boots had revealed skills that could change everything. As they prepared to continue their journey, Jonas finally spoke the words that would transform both their lives. "I can't read," he said quietly. "Built my whole reputation on memory and instinct, but the territorial disputes are getting more complex. Need someone who can navigate legal documents and contracts." Celeste understood immediately. She hadn't been rescued, she had been recruited. "You want a partner," she said. Jonas nodded. "Question is, are you ready to use everything you know?" For the first time since the trading post-humiliation, Celeste smiled. Jonas's ranch sprawled across a valley green with promise and prosperity. Celeste had expected a simple homestead, but the property revealed wealth that few men in the territory possessed. Cattle grazed in organized pastures, while well-maintained buildings spoke of careful planning and steady success. "This is more than a mediator's earnings," Celeste observed as they approached the main house. Jonas dismounted with the fluid grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Freedom taught me to think beyond tomorrow." He gestured toward a smaller building near the house. "That's the office where we'll work. Legal documents from 3 territories pile up faster than I can pretend to understand them." The confession struck Celeste like lightning illuminating a dark landscape. The great Jonas Forrester, respected across the Southwest for his wisdom in settling disputes, carried a secret that could destroy everything he had built. Yet he trusted her with this vulnerability after knowing her for mere hours. Inside the office, stacks of official papers covered every available surface. Territorial contracts, land deeds, mining claims, and dispute settlements created a maze of legal complexity that would challenge even trained lawyers. Jonas watched nervously as Celeste examined the documents with growing amazement. "You've been managing all this from memory?" she asked, scanning a particularly intricate water rights agreement. "Had help from folks who could read the basics, but lately the disputes require understanding legal precedents and territorial codes." Jonas ran his massive hands through his graying hair. One mistake could cost families their land or start wars between settlements. Celeste settled into the chair behind the cluttered desk, feeling knowledge and purpose align for the first time in years. The education forced upon her during those dangerous plantation lessons now revealed its true value. She began organizing documents by category, her mind already cataloging the complex relationships between different legal cases. "We start tomorrow," she announced with quiet confidence. The partnership that followed transformed both their lives in ways neither had anticipated. Celeste's legal knowledge combined with Jonas's reputation and diplomatic skills created the most effective mediation team the territory had ever seen. Disputes that had festered for months resolved within days under their joint approach. Their first major case involved a water rights conflict between two farming communities. While Jonas negotiated face-to-face with the angry settlers, Celeste researched territorial precedents and drafted agreements that satisfied both parties' legal requirements. The successful resolution established their reputation as a formidable team. Word spread quickly through the interconnected network of frontier communities. Settlers who once would have scorned Celeste now sought her expertise with urgent respect. She traded her worn dress for practical clothing that reflected her new professional status, carrying law books and legal documents with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling. Eleanor Griffith provided the most dramatic example of changing attitudes. The banker's daughter, who had once giggled at Celeste's humiliation, now appeared at their office seeking advice about women's property rights under territorial law. "My father wants to arrange a marriage that would transfer my inheritance to my future husband," Eleanor explained nervously. "I wondered if there might be legal protections I could invoke." Celeste spent an hour explaining the complex intersection of territorial, federal, and common law regarding women's rights. Eleanor left with documents that would preserve her financial independence, and more importantly, with a new understanding of the intelligence she had previously dismissed. The transformation extended beyond individual cases. Celeste and Jonas developed a reputation for fairness that transcended the social divisions plaguing frontier communities. Native Americans, Mexican settlers, freed slaves, and white homesteaders all received equal treatment under their mediation process. Justice became blind to the prejudices that had previously determined outcomes. Their success attracted attention from the territorial capital. Governor Bradford himself requested their assistance with the most challenging dispute facing the region. The railroad company wanted to build through land sacred to the Apache Nation, while simultaneously displacing several established homesteader families. Previous mediators had failed completely, leaving the situation volatile and dangerous. "This could establish territorial precedent for decades," Jonas explained as they reviewed the case files. "Get it wrong, and we could have open warfare. Get it right, and we set the standard for how progress and tradition can coexist." Celeste studied maps and legal documents late into the night, searching for creative solutions that could satisfy seemingly incompatible interests. The complexity challenged every skill she possessed, but also excited her in ways she had never experienced. This was the work she had been prepared for during those secret lessons years ago. As their reputation grew, so did the dangers. Success in the territories always attracted enemies, and their influence over major economic decisions made them valuable targets. Wealthy interests who profited from chaos and legal confusion saw the mediation team as a threat to established power structures. The first warning came through unofficial channels. A friendly bartender mentioned that strangers had been asking questions about Jonas's business practices and Celeste's background. Someone wanted information about the partnership that was resolving too many profitable disputes. "We're making enemies," Jonas observed after hearing the reports. Celeste looked up from the railroad case documents spread across their office table. "Good. That means we're changing things that needed changing." But even as she spoke with confidence, a chill of foreboding settled over her. The past had a way of returning when least expected, and she carried secrets that could destroy not just her own future, but Jonas's hard-earned respect as well. 3 days later, a dust cloud on the horizon announced the arrival of riders who would test everything they had built together. The dust cloud resolved into 3 riders approaching Jonas's ranch with the purposeful urgency of men carrying official business. Celeste recognized the lead figure before he dismounted, and her blood turned cold as desert stone. Silas Reston sat straighter in his saddle than she remembered, wearing clothes that spoke of sudden wealth and newfound confidence. "Celeste," Silas called across the yard with false warmth, "you're looking prosperous." Behind him rode Judge Marcus Whitley, a territorial official known for interpreting law through the lens of personal profit. The third man remained mounted, his expensive suit and calculating eyes marking him as someone accustomed to buying favorable outcomes. Jonas emerged from the house, his massive frame casting protective shadows across the porch where Celeste stood frozen. The giant cowboy's hand rested casually near his weapon, a subtle warning that didn't go unnoticed by the visitors. "Silas," Jonas acknowledged with cold formality. "Thought you were headed to California gold country." "Struck it rich in the mountains," Silas replied, patting a leather pouch that clinked with promise. "Came back to collect what belongs to me." Judge Whitley produced an official document with theatrical flourish. "According to territorial law, this woman remains legally married to Silas Reston. Any earnings or property acquired during their separation belongs equally to both spouses." The words hit Celeste like physical blows. Months of building a new life, of discovering her true worth, suddenly balanced on the edge of legal technicalities she had hoped never to face. Her mind raced through territorial statutes, searching for precedents that might protect her newfound freedom. "The marriage contract was voided when he sold me," she said, stepping forward with hard-earned confidence. Judge Whitley's smile carried the cruelty of a man who enjoyed wielding power over the powerless. "Human trafficking isn't legally recognized in territorial courts. The sale was simply a temporary arrangement between spouses." Jonas's jaw tightened with barely controlled fury. "You're twisting the law to fit your purpose." "The law is quite clear," the judge continued. "Mrs. Reston's mediation earnings and partnership assets fall under community property statutes. Her husband has legal claim to 50% of everything." The mounted stranger finally spoke, his voice carrying Eastern education and unlimited resources. "I'm James Morrison, representing various business interests. We're prepared to facilitate this legal matter efficiently and quietly." Celeste studied Morrison's face, noting the calculated coldness of someone accustomed to buying human dignity. Something about his manner suggested connections that extended far beyond territorial jurisdiction. The timing of this legal challenge felt too convenient, too perfectly orchestrated. "How exactly did you strike it rich, Silas?" she asked, her lawyer's instincts sensing deception. Silas's confident facade flickered momentarily. "Gold claim up near Prescott. Lucky strike in a played-out mine." "Funny thing about gold claims," Jonas interjected. "They're all registered with the territorial office. Should be easy enough to verify." Morrison's hand moved to his coat pocket, producing a stack of official-looking papers. "All properly documented. Mr. Reston's claim is legitimate and profitable." But Celeste caught the slight tremor in Silas's voice, the way his eyes avoided direct contact when discussing his supposed fortune. Years of reading People for Survival had taught her to recognize lies wrapped in convenient truths. This entire confrontation felt staged, scripted by someone with resources far exceeding a lucky prospector's means. "I want to see the original claim documents," she demanded. Judge Whitley's patience evaporated like desert rain. "This court doesn't require your approval, Mrs. Reston. Legal proceedings begin tomorrow morning. You have until then to gather your financial records for division." The three men rode away with the satisfaction of predators who had cornered their prey. Celeste and Jonas stood in the gathering dusk, watching dust clouds obscure the horizon like approaching storm fronts. "They're lying about something," Celeste said, her mind already working through the legal implications. Jonas nodded grimly. "Question is what and why now?" That evening, Celeste buried herself in territorial law books, searching for loopholes and precedents that might protect her freedom. The partnership had transformed her from property into professional, but legal technicalities could strip away everything she had built. Her fingers traced through statute after statute, looking for the legal weapons she needed to fight back. "Found something," she announced near midnight, her voice tight with discovery. Jonas looked up from cleaning his rifle, a precaution that spoke to his own concerns about their visitor's true intentions. "The Pacific Railway Act of 1862 specifically prohibits human trafficking in all territories," Celeste continued, excitement building in her voice. "Silas's sale violated federal law, which supersedes territorial marriage contracts. Will that hold up in Whitley's court?" Celeste's smile carried the sharpness of a blade finding its target. "Not in his court, but the territorial governor has jurisdiction over federal law violations. We appeal directly to Bradford." Yet even as she spoke with renewed confidence, nagging doubts plagued her thoughts. Morrison's expensive clothes and casual authority suggested resources that could corrupt even territorial governors. The railroad case they were mediating involved massive financial interests, and their success threatened established power structures. "There's more to this than Silas wanting his wife back," she said quietly. Jonas set down his rifle and moved to the window, scanning the darkness for movement that didn't belong. "I know. Question is whether we can figure out what before they spring their real trap." Outside, night sounds carried across the valley with deceptive peace, while somewhere in the darkness, plans that had been months in the making moved toward their final phase. The territorial courthouse buzzed with unprecedented activity, as news spread that the Reston case had exploded into something far larger than a simple marital dispute. Governor Bradford himself had arrived from the capital, transforming what should have been a routine hearing into a territorial investigation that would determine the future of legal precedent across the Southwest. Celeste sat at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by documents that represented weeks of relentless research. Her discovery of the railroad conspiracy had started with a single inconsistency in Silas's gold claim paperwork, but careful investigation had revealed corruption that reached into the highest levels of territorial business and politics. "The evidence speaks for itself," she announced as Governor Bradford called the session to order. "Silas Reston never owned a gold mine. His sudden wealth came from the Colorado and Western Railroad Company in exchange for infiltrating our mediation practice." She produced financial records that painted a clear picture of bribery and conspiracy. Bank deposits in Silas's name corresponded exactly with dates when sensitive information about the Apache land dispute had been leaked to railroad interests. The supposed gold claim existed only on forged documents that crumbled under official scrutiny. Judge Whitley squirmed in his seat as Celeste continued her presentation. Furthermore, Judge Whitley received substantial payments from the same railroad interests, compromising his ability to provide impartial legal judgment in matters affecting their business operations. The courthouse erupted in murmurs of shock and outrage. Governor Bradford's face darkened with the fury of a man who had discovered corruption in his own territory. Eleanor Griffith, who had arrived to support Celeste, gasped at the scope of the conspiracy being revealed. James Morrison, the supposed business representative, finally showed his true colors. "These are serious accusations requiring substantial proof," he said, his Eastern accent now carrying desperate authority. Celeste smiled with the confidence of someone holding unbeatable cards. I have bank records, correspondence, and witness testimony from railroad employees who were paid to create artificial conflicts between Apache communities and homesteader families. The second major twist hit the courtroom like lightning striking clear sky. Celeste's research had uncovered the true scope of Jonas's land holdings, revealing that the gentle giant owned mineral rights and territory that made him one of the wealthiest men in the Southwest. The Apache dispute wasn't random conflict but systematic targeting of his property. The railroad company has been orchestrating this entire crisis, she continued, her voice carrying across the silent courthouse. They identified Jonas Forrester's land holdings and mineral rights as obstacles to their expansion plans, creating artificial conflict between Apache communities and settlers would justify territorial intervention and land seizure. Jonas stood slowly, his massive frame commanding attention as he faced the assembled crowd. I never knew the extent of my own holdings, he admitted with characteristic honesty. Couldn't read the legal documents that established my property rights after the war. The admission sent shockwaves through spectators who had assumed the great mediator understood every aspect of his business dealings. But rather than diminishing his reputation, the confession highlighted the partnership that had made his success possible. Celeste discovered what I couldn't see, Jonas continued. Her legal knowledge revealed not just my own property rights, but the systematic corruption that was stealing from the entire territory. Morrison made one final desperate play. Even if these allegations were true, they don't address the original marital dispute. Mrs. Reston remains legally bound to her husband regardless of his business associations. Celeste had saved her strongest argument for this moment. The Pacific Railway Act of 1862 specifically prohibits human trafficking in all territories. Sela's Reston's sale of me for a pair of boots violated federal law, making our marriage contract legally void under Territorial Statute 247B. She produced the relevant legal precedents with the precision of someone who had spent years studying law in secret. Every citation was accurate, every legal argument was sound, and every piece of evidence was properly documented. Governor Bradford reviewed the documents with growing amazement. This is the most comprehensive legal presentation I've seen in 20 years of territorial service, he announced. The evidence of conspiracy is overwhelming, and the legal arguments are flawless. Silas finally broke under the pressure of his crumbling deception. They promised me enough money to start over in California, he confessed, his voice cracking with the weight of his betrayal. Said all I had to do was claim my legal rights as her husband and get access to their business records. The confession sealed the case completely. Judge Whitley was immediately suspended pending full investigation, while Morrison found himself facing federal charges for conspiracy and bribery. The railroad company's illegal land grab was exposed and stopped, protecting not just Jonas's property, but the rights of countless families throughout the territory. But the most profound transformation occurred in the courtroom itself. Eleanor Griffith stood to address the governor, her voice carrying newfound strength and purpose. Mrs. Celeste Jennings has shown us what's possible when intelligence and determination replace prejudice and assumption, she declared. I request permission to assist in establishing the territory's first integrated school for adult education. The crowd that had once mocked Celeste's humiliation now applauded her triumph. Citizens who had dismissed her as worthless property now recognized her as the legal mind that had saved their community from systematic corruption. Governor Bradford rendered his final judgment with the satisfaction of justice properly served. The marriage between Celeste and Silas Reston is hereby annulled due to federal law violations. All charges against Mrs. Jennings are dismissed, and the territorial government formally recognizes Forrester and Jennings as the official mediation authority for all three territories. As the gavel fell, Celeste felt the final chains of her past life break away forever. 6 months after the courthouse victory, the Arizona Territory looked remarkably different from the divided landscape that had existed before Celeste and Jonah's transformed the meaning of justice. Their success had rippled outward like stones thrown into still water, creating waves of change that reached every corner of the Southwest. The Apache Land Agreement stood as a monument to what could be accomplished when intelligence replaced force. Sacred tribal sites remained protected, while the railroad company built through alternative routes that respected both progress and tradition. Chief Running Bear himself had praised the mediation process as the first time white negotiators had listened with genuine respect rather than merely waiting to speak. Celeste stood in the doorway of the territorial school she had established, watching Alina Griffith lead a mixed class of Apache children, Mexican settlers, freed slaves, and white homesteader families through their reading lessons. The sight would have been impossible to imagine during those dark days at the trading post, yet now it seemed as natural as sunrise. 23 new students this week, Alina reported, her transformation from privileged banker's daughter to passionate educator complete. Word is spreading that education opens doors that money alone cannot unlock. Inside the schoolhouse, Jonas sat with the concentration of a man discovering treasures he never knew existed. His massive hands carefully traced letters across slate boards, while his mind absorbed knowledge that had been denied to him for decades. The great mediator who had built his reputation on wisdom and intuition now added literacy to his formidable arsenal of skills. Never thought words on a page could hold so much power, he said during their evening study sessions. All those years of pretending I understood legal documents when I was really just guessing. Celeste smiled as she watched him read through territorial statutes with growing confidence. Knowledge was always your strength. Now you have the tools to access it directly. Their mediation practice had evolved into something resembling a territorial law firm, with requests for assistance arriving daily from communities across 3 territories. The Forrester and Jennings name carried weight that transcended the social barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. The most satisfying transformation involved their original community. The trading post where Celeste had been sold for boots now served as a regular stop on their mediation circuit, and the same people who had once mocked her humiliation now sought her wisdom for their most complex disputes. Judge Celeste, the homesteader called out as she approached the familiar desert outpost, got a water rights problem that's been festering for months. Could use your expertise. The title carried respect that had been earned through demonstrated competence rather than granted through social position. Celeste had discovered that true authority came not from what others assumed about her, but from what she could accomplish when given the opportunity to prove her worth. Even Silas had found a form of redemption in his diminished circumstances. The stable where he worked mucking stalls was owned by a former client of the mediation practice, and his employer had reported steady improvement in both work ethic and character. The humiliation of his public confession seemed to have burned away the desperate selfishness that had led to his betrayal. She deserved better than I could give her, he had told the stable owner. Maybe losing everything was what I needed to find something worth keeping. The boots that had purchased Celeste's freedom now occupied a place of honor in the Forrester and Jennings office, displayed not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a symbol of how far determination and intelligence could carry someone willing to fight for dignity. Visitors often asked about their significance, and Celeste had learned to tell the story with pride rather than shame. Those boots represent the day my real life began, she would explain. Sometimes what looks like the worst moment turns out to be the doorway to everything you were meant to become. The railroad conspiracy trials had concluded with sentences that sent clear messages about the consequences of systematic corruption. James Morrison faced federal prison, while Judge Whitley was stripped of his position and banned from practicing law in any territory. The Colorado and Western Railroad Company paid substantial reparations to affected communities and operated under territorial oversight that prevented future exploitation. Governor Bradford had used the case as a model for territorial reform, establishing legal protections that prevented the kind of systematic disenfranchisement that had made the conspiracy possible. Celeste's legal arguments had become precedents that would protect vulnerable citizens for generations. As evening settled over their valley ranch, Celeste and Jonas reviewed the week's cases from their comfortable office. Partnership had evolved into something deeper than professional collaboration, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice that transcended individual ambition. "Got a letter from the territorial capital," Jonas announced, holding up official correspondence. "Governor wants us to establish a mediation training program for other territories." Celeste looked up from the legal brief she was drafting. "Our methods are working. Maybe it's time to teach others how to build bridges instead of walls." Outside their window, the desert bloomed with the promise of spring rains. Students walked home from the schoolhouse carrying books and dreams that would have been impossible just months before. The community that had once divided itself along lines of race and class now worked together toward common goals that benefited everyone. The woman who had been sold for a pair of boots had become the architect of a new social order based on merit, compassion, and the revolutionary idea that human worth could not be measured by external circumstances. Her journey from property to partner had transformed not just her own life, but the entire territory's understanding of what justice could accomplish when wisdom replaced prejudice. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.